Welcome everyone to our webinar. This webinar will be all about the importance of play, and this is our third webinar in this series. We are so excited to be here with you today. I'm reading all of these ideas. I'm a big board game person myself, so you're giving me great ideas for this weekend. And I'm excited to have you here, and I'm excited for you to learn from the educators that we have here on our panel tonight. My name is Alyssa Bruner. I live in Washington, D.C. I work full-time for the Center for Responsive Schools as a curriculum and instructional designer with a focus on elementary school. Because before this, I worked as a first grade, second grade, and fifth grade teacher and a responsive classroom coordinator at a pre-K through eighth grade school. I'm joined here tonight by my colleague, Kate.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Conway. I am also a curriculum and instructional designer in the programs department at Responsive Classroom. My focus is largely middle school and leadership. Before this, I have worked in mostly independent schools spanning pre-K, or 3 years old actually, through 12th grade, both here and abroad. I now live on the island of Kauai, where I most recently was head of school at an independent school here. We'll also be introducing, or allowing them to introduce themselves, our wonderful panelists that we have here with us tonight. We'll start with Chris.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Carter, and I currently teach grades 3 through 5 science in Brooklyn, New York. I've also taught kindergarten, second, third, and sixth grade as a homeroom classroom teacher.
Hi, everyone.
Caitlin?
My name is Caitlin Slater. I live about an hour west of DC and teach at an independent school called the Hill School in Middleburg, Virginia. I currently am a junior kindergarten classroom teacher, as well as a middle school 4th, 5th, and 6th grade sports coach in the afternoon.
Ina.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ina Pannell-Saint Surin, and I also am a teacher in Brooklyn, New York, just recently retired. And I've taught over the years pre-K all the way straight through to 5th grade, all special education.
Thank you so much, everybody. We also want to say hello and welcome Kristen Vincent. Kristen, you want to wave and introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I am the director of marketing, and so I'm here to provide some support for our hosts and panelists. So I'm going to turn off my camera and I'll be behind the scenes, but you can reach me through the chat and the Q&A.
Thank you so much. So, sorry, I'm gotta click on the right thing. A few webinar tips before we get started. If you are having any issues with bandwidth or connection, feel free to close all of your other programs and documents and browsers and whatever you have to maximize your bandwidth, as well as to leave and then re-enter if you experience some sort of lag or any issues. We also will be using the Q&A feature. That's a little bit easier for Kristen, who you just met, to answer rather than making sure she gets everything in the chat, because there are times when the chat gets really busy. So if you have any logistics or even just a specific question about Responsive Classroom or the topic, or for our panelists, you can pop that into the Q&A. In the chat feature, we'll be asking you to reflect on a few things and share a few things. So feel free to pop those comments and questions and answers into the chat feature. It's also a great place if you are having a little bit of an epiphany or a realization or a connection to share with everybody. So make sure, as Kristen just wrote in the chat, to set that to everyone so that everyone can see it. I think most people, by default, it goes to hosts and panelists. And lastly, we will be recording this, so it will be emailed to you in a few days.
So to get us started, we're going to ask you to take a minute and review the learning goals that we have for you today about the importance of play. And maybe choose one that you're going to focus primarily on as you're learning from us and our panelists today. We'll give just a minute for you to read those over. All right. Now we're going to ask you to do some reflection. So think back to that opening prompt and what you shared with us about a game, an activity, or a sport that you like to play. And now that you have that in mind, share with us in the chat, how does it make you feel when you're playing that game, that activity, or that sport? So we'll give a couple of minutes for those answers to come in and for you all to read each other's responses. How does it make you feel? The opening prompt, if you missed it, was just to think about a game, a sport, or an activity that you enjoy participating in. Yeah, keep those responses coming. As I'm reading the comments, and I'm sure as you are as well, we're seeing some of those benefits of play in us as adults. And this really helps to hone in on the fact that play is essential on many levels for all ages. So thank you for sharing.
So according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, play is considered to be integral to the academic environment for both social, emotional, and academic development. And it's through play that students become curious, develop theories and strategies, and learn to apply appropriate risk-taking. Students benefit from spending time actively engaging with their studies, their academics, rather than simply listening or watching. Excuse me. This relates to how to fully learn something, there needs to be a period of exploration and inquiry. And we can think of that as playing with the information at hand and looking for more. And an added benefit to increasing play-based learning in classrooms is that active and engaging learning can lead to deeper, more permanent learning. So something being active, engaging, meaningful, iterative, joyful is engaging in a type of play. So it doesn't mean that you have to throw all of the academics out and just play on the rug. You can actually make things very playful and give students opportunities to play within academics.
Thanks, Kate. I think we have some of these references on the slide at the bottom here too. So when we're thinking about play and the benefits, the American Academy of Pediatrics state that play allows children to use their creativity while developing their imagination, their dexterity, and physical, cognitive, and emotional strength. With that being said, they indicate that play is super important to healthy brain development. While all of this research really shows that unstructured play is very important, we know as teachers that there are limited ways that we can offer that in schools. Of course, we can advocate for ample recess time and we can offer choice time whenever we have the chance to do so. But what we're going to focus on mostly in today's webinar, is how to structure opportunities for play within the learning day.
So take a moment and read this quote here and think about what are some strategies or practices that you already use to promote play and keep students engaged, and share some of those into the chat, please. Alyssa's also pasted that question in the chat if you want to reread it. Great. There are so many great ideas being shared. Keep sharing them. Even if you've already shared and you think of something else, keep sharing. There's really so many ways to promote play within the classroom. And the best way to hear about them is to hear from our panelists who will shed even more light on this topic.
All right, so we just heard all about the benefits of play. So that's where we would like to begin. So I'm going to ask, how do you see your students benefiting from play? And we'll start with Caitlin with this question. How do you see your students benefiting from play?
I see it benefiting both of my roles in different ways. Within my pre-K classroom, play is really integral. They are 4 and 5 years old. We are settling in with free play. They're working on conflict resolution, how to compromise, how to share. And when you continue to kind of weave that through your day, I have found that it creates an incredibly happy and joyous environment for your kids to grow up and learn and be in. RC talks a lot about belonging, significance, and fun, and how positively that impacts your learning. And when you enjoy more play with your students, I have found that it connects you guys. So it gives more belonging, it gives more significance. When you as a teacher are having fun within your games or your academics, it's increasing the fun for their learning. When I've seen when we start to model certain behaviors or vocabulary with kids, they really tend to mimic what it is and our tone that we use. So if I'm modeling more engagement, social interaction, a positive attitude, being open-minded, they tend to mimic that back. So whatever we're giving to our students, how playful we are with them, they're giving it back. I also find that it really hooks and engages your kids. So it might be just a math activity that you're doing, but if you pretend that it's a game, it's going to pull them in. It's going to get them excited. I've also really seen that it fills a developmental need of emotional security and safety in a classroom. So the more fun that you're having as kids, even up in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade sports, they want to play. They want to have fun. So when you give them that fun and that play, it fills a need, which then positively impacts their behavior throughout the day.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. How about you, Ina? How did you see your students benefiting from play?
Well, one main benefit that I've seen throughout is the joy that it brings to them in the classroom. I think that is very important for students who are spending 7 hours of a day in a classroom, and oftentimes in just that one room for much of the time, that they do have that opportunity to experience some joy and some pleasure throughout their learning. I also think that, in line with Responsive Classroom and Fly 5, which are some Center for Responsive Schools programs that we, are engaged in, that it helps to build some of the social emotional learning skills. Some social skills get built when they have those opportunities to interact with each other and play, as well as the emotional. How do we deal with, a conflict that might come up? How do we support another child who is, feeling poorly that they're not the winner in this particular round? Those kinds of skills of being able to cooperate with each other, to have empathy, to show responsibility for each other throughout the play that they engage in are really important skills that are going to really stead them well, not only in the classroom, but outside of the classroom and in life later on into adulthood. So for me, the joy of play and then all the skill building that it does, are some really big, key, important aspects of having play as an opportunity for your students.
And for me, I just see many students taking more risks in the classroom. As a science teacher in New York City, a lot of elementary schools have science as a special. So students are coming to science 1 to 2 or 3 times a week for 45 minutes. And as an upper grade science teacher, I often see students and hear students come in saying either science is challenging or it's becoming more challenging as they move into 3rd grade, 4th grade, or 5th grade. And it just integrating play reduces that level of risk for students. I see them more likely to be assertive when they're working in partnerships or in small groups. And that just leads to better cooperation among students. Much of the work that I'm having students do is not solo. They're working with partners, they're working with groups of 3 or 4 students. And then because they're being more playful, that gives them opportunities to practice scientific vocabulary. So that's one of the novelties of within my content area is the vocabulary that we're using. And they're more likely to use it. They're more likely to experiment with that language and the concepts that we're doing within science.
Thank you so much. One thing that we know from teachers is that time is a precious commodity. And so we're hoping that you could each speak to how you incorporate play into the classroom and curriculum to enhance engagement and academic achievement, especially in the light of how you're weaving it in so that it doesn't feel like it's an extra piece of time that you need to take. Ina, could you start us off?
Yeah, sure. And so when I'm thinking about the academic content that I teach to students, I often think about the ways that it can become more joyful and more playful for them. And in addition to the recess and the less structured times, the recess, the choice time, being able to add games into my curricula, or to be able to add projects that they get to work on together into my curricula, are all opportunities for them to be then using some of their strengths, some of their skills, some of their intelligences in the learning process. So for example, if we're doing a read aloud or there is some reading, I allow them to sketch. Let them sketch what they are envisioning is happening in the story, because that also is some really good comprehension work that's going on, but then it also gives them the opportunity to have that skill that might be relaxing for them or might be joyful for them to be able to continue the learning process. I remember having one student who really felt, adverse to fractions. I hate fractions. I don't like fractions. But I also noticed that she is a hair braider, that she would come to school in different styles that she would have her hair in, and she would do them herself and she could do them on other people, and so we did for hair braiding for fraction work, because there's fractions involved in that. You have to be able to understand, how to divide the hair into sections that are equal and equivalent. And so having them have opportunities like that to be able to use their skills and their talents and their joys are ways that I like to incorporate into the classroom. Small group work and having them do anything that might be related to a particular social studies topic, and they're working in a small group and they're doing research, also allows them to have that opportunity to do some problem solving, to take on different roles and be cooperative with each other, and make the learning more fun and more self-directed. So those are some ways that I like to try and incorporate the joy in the learning.
Yeah, and for me, within science, play comes quite natural. Within the observations that we're doing all throughout all of the 3 grades that I work with, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, all of my grades work with living organisms rather, and they do observations. So a lot of that inquiry, a lot of the questioning, a lot of the wonderings come out through those observations, and they can be quite playful. Wondering if they tap on the trout tank, what the behavioral response might be. If they pick up one of the mealworms or darkling beetles in the classroom in 4th grade, how might they move? How might blocking their movement, how might that change their behavior? The quail chicks that were hatching, those observations lead to a lot more questions about what they might look like and what their behaviors might be outside of our classroom. Also, just within a lot of my studies, I integrate play into my assessments. So for example, my 3rd graders study magnetism. So I have them build magnetic structures, magnetic sculptures that integrate the concepts that we've learned as an assessment within our studies. I also use the responsive classroom practice of guided discovery when I'm introducing new materials that we're using. So it might be something as simple as hand lenses, and I might give them multiple different hand lenses to use. I have them think about why they might use one versus the other, and give them time to explore those before they actually are going to use it for an experiment. Same with rulers. I give them options. They might use a paper ruler or they might use a plastic ruler. They kind of play around with why they might use one versus the other, and then they use it for whatever that experiment or activity that we might be doing. I also integrate playfulness into my message. So even though I'm not doing a morning responsive classroom morning meeting as a science teacher, I integrate some playfulness and some open-ended questions into the message that's on display on my smartboard or on my easel when students walk into science each day.
And I integrate it very differently between my two roles within a day. So within my pre-K class, play is very innate. And I think that there's a difference between play and being playful. And play is something that is just a part of our day in general. It's really important for that age, but we do need to get some academic learning in. And so becoming a little bit playful within our academics is really important and really engaging for them as students. A lot of what I think we can do as teachers is also model and label and kind of guide them in how we want them to start to view academics. So we have I call it a game. It's really not a game, it's really flashcards. And we do that to go over letter sounds and letter names, but we call it See It, Say It. And when I say we're going to play See It, Say It, I say we're going to play it. They get excited because they think that they're playing. They think that it's a game when really it's just flashcards. So we're getting in the academic time, but I'm treating it as something playful and enjoyable for a 4 and a 5-year-old. I think with small children's stories is a really easy way to be playful. Within personalities as teachers, I think when you hear playful or play with small children, you go to like sing-songy and this whole bubbly personality. And if that's not you, I think finding a way that you can use your own personality in your classroom to benefit it, you want to make sure that you're doing something that is appropriate for you and sustainable throughout a day. So I go with stories more than something like a song because that's just my personality. So going with some of those stories can help pull them in, can help guide a math lesson to make it feel a little bit more mystical or magical or special. And within sports, it's a little bit different. So we have within our school, everyone with 4th, 5th, and 6th is required to play team sports. So within my student body, I have a very wide range of abilities. I have a very wide range of engagement levels. I have kids that love sports, that play outside of school, that would like to be there for their entire day. I have children in my class that hope to be sick in the afternoon so that they don't have to be there. That's just the name of the game. And when I have them in, my goal is to give them enough skills so that they are comfortable when they're playing the game, but while they're there to let them have some enjoyment and some fun. We are currently playing basketball, and we came back from break, and I already had a kid that was really trying to avoid not feeling comfortable. And the basketball game that we were playing was there was a cone in the middle and all of the kids around on dots, and they had to pass the ball around the circle. And there was one person in the middle trying to guard the cone, and your goal is to knock over the cone with the ball. And he was really avoidant and was really hoping to get out. And I said, "Oh, but do you know what we're doing?" And he was like, "No, what are we doing?" I said, "Oh, this is the dragon treasure." And I made up a whole story about how the person in the middle was a dragon and the cone was their treasure. And the goal of the whole village was to knock over the dragon's treasure. And by the end of that game, that boy came up and he goes, "Can I be the next dragon?" And I was like, "Absolutely, you may." And so getting those kids that this is not what they're comfortable with. They're not the one that is hoping to put themselves out there. Getting them to engage and pull opens up a whole different mental capacity for that game, for that sport. It accesses a different part of their brain. There's a difference between skill building and muscle memory and then gameplay and the thought process of, "Oh, I shouldn't make that pass. I should go over here." And those stories and those games develop the other aspect within the sports program that's really important to gameplay.
Thank you all for sharing how you balance and you find the time for play. There are also a lot of great ideas in the chat. So I hope that while there's a lull, you're reading those messages in the chat from your fellow teachers as well that are here today. As we're thinking about balancing that time, we're also thinking about rigor. We know that that's a major focus in these days, and test scores and rigorous education is everything that our schools are focused on, for better or for worse. So when we think about that and we think about playfulness, how do you balance that academic rigor with those playful activities? And I'll start this question with you, Chris.
And that can be quite challenging, to be honest. I mean, I only see 2 of my grades twice a week for 45 minutes. So that's not a lot of time to really get into a lot of the science activities and experiments that we're doing, especially since a lot of them cover several days or several weeks within our studies. So one thing that I do is I definitely ensure that students have a lab sheet to kind of hold themselves accountable, also holds me accountable so I can check in as I'm circulating throughout the classroom. So even if they're working with a partner individually, they're still kind of putting pencil to paper, jotting down their observations, their notes. And also this is the place where they're jotting down their jobs that they're doing with their partner or within their small group. I also, just for time management's sake, oftentimes I'll share with them how much time they have for various parts of that activity or experiment. I'll use a smartboard timer or my time timer, like a lot of teachers do. At my school, not all our periods are the exact same length. So our last period, for example, is shorter than the other period. So I always remind my 7th period class that we have a shorter period of time than the other classes. So we have to be focused and get to work right away. And then also, just with respect to my language that I use with my students, I hold my students accountable. So reinforcing them when I hear them using the vocabulary, the science vocabulary, if I notice students remembering to label on their lab sheets or in their observations specific. So for example, for studying plants, and I'm noticing students are labeling the plant parts naturally, I'll reinforce that, I'll share that. I see students that are remembering to label our plant parts, remembering the various parts of the plant. I also use reminding language. So I also remind students of the charts around the room, of the work that we've already done to lead to this activity or this experiment that we're doing, to hold them accountable as well.
I think that being proactive and being purposeful is really important within keeping the balance. We talk a lot about clear boundaries and setting expectations. And if you have classroom rules or guidelines that you can refer to, when the playfulness gets out of the boundary of what is productive, having something to be able to refer to. When you set up those proactive boundaries and you make that connection early on within the year, it makes it easier often to guide the kids back in, to get them back on track. If you're consistent with a chime or some other way to get their attention, being able to stop it before it goes over the edge helps them to learn how to regulate, even identifying it's too big. How can we get it to be smaller? And reinforcing, I noticed that you guys brought it back very nicely. That lets us play more often. So giving those kind of thoughts that we have as teachers out loud, I think helps them also see where our mindset is and learn those social interactions of playing off of a teacher. I think that within the sports program, when I play a game like the dragon game, I think it's really important to then also say, so we worked on a skill then. What skill was that? Where in a game do you use that skill? So it's putting purpose and real life application behind play. We play a lot within interacting socially and being able, even if you're doing it as pretend, how can you make that feel more real life so that although it feels like play, you apply it to your real life. So it is purposeful. It is building upon things. Teacher language within the classroom on both sides, keeping it positive, creates such a playful and happy and joyous environment that guides a lot of that play, that guides a lot of the interactions and how children build the way that they interact with each other as well as with the teacher in the classroom. So I think that really being proactive and purposeful and kind of getting that base is at the beginning of the year can be really helpful and beneficial.
Well, adding on to what both Caitlin and Chris have said, I think that also being mindful of the children and their emotional state at any given point during the day. I mean, school can be intense, and it's easy for kids to burn out without having those opportunities to be playful. And so, I make sure that I'm offering my students a brain break of some kind, an energizer of sorts, where they just get to let go of the learning and we're engaging in something that's, interactive, that's active. and that is fun for them. And once we get that opportunity to just take those few minutes to engage in that, that can make the difference between them coming back more focused and ready to learn for another stretch of the day. And so I have to be really mindful of when my students need that opportunity for a brain break or an energizer, because those are going to be the times when we can interject play. And the play can be that we're singing a song together in some kind of game, or that we're doing limbo and doing a challenge, or maybe even that we're dancing, that we're just getting up and moving our bodies, that those are opportunities for our students to really decompress a little bit, and in the course of the day before they go back to something that's more rigorous. I also, find many opportunities to bring play in or playfulness into my morning meetings. So since we have morning meetings daily, then I also want to make sure that the activities that I'm choosing or the greetings that I'm choosing are something that the children are going to be engaged in, that they're going to want to do, that they're going to have fun with, that they're going to be accountable for, and that they're also going to be supportive of each other. There are certain games and there's certain activities that I would reserve for later in the year when we get to know each other better and we can be more of a community with a group identity by then. But having opportunities for them to be able to interact, connect, to have those connections and that interconnectedness and be responsible for each other, will be things that I will incorporate into my morning meetings and my closing circles. And then another thing that I do want to say and plug is the mindfulness, and this I learned a lot from the Fly 5 program, is those opportunities to incorporate mindfulness for the students, to just be able to be still, to be thinking about our emotions, to be thinking about our feelings, to be thinking about our social interactions are all really very important for students in the community. And it also provides them with an opportunity to balance the rigor of the academics along with the need for their social and emotional learning. One of the biggest, and it seems like year after year, one of the favorite types of mindfulness that I have done, especially after a field trip, which can be rigorous in its own way, is being able to get back into the classroom and the kids are tired and they're exhausted, and we just do Shavasana. We just lay on the floor and put on some quiet music and let our bodies just feel the floor and then regulate our central nervous system and do some deep breathing. And they love it so much that they'll ask for it. They'll actually ask for, can we do Shavasana? Can we lay on the floor? Whatever. And those are opportunities when they are also being able to direct me for what they feel they need in that moment. So it gets to a point later on in the year where they feel comfortable just coming to you. If you're doing it on a regular basis and incorporating it, reviewing what the rules are about how you're going to be engaging in these types of activities, and then letting them know that we can have this success. And then usually by the end of the year, I'm singing their praises and I'll just make up some ditty and I'll just sing a song about them becoming, the next grade. If they're fifth graders, then they're going to be sixth graders, and there's sixth graders in the house now. And they love that. They love anything that makes them feel the joy of learning and being together in the community.
Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your answers to the questions that we had. We do have a few questions from some of the participants, and there's two that I'm going to kind of combine. One most people can see in the chat is from Cassandra. Thank you. What would you recommend as a play activity when you're time constrained? Because you're doing pull-out groups and have a specific schedule to follow. And that's similar to one that we have that's about having a very strict schedule and not really being able to go off script. And how do we address that? So before I have some answers, I wanted to throw that to the three of you and see if there's anything that pops to mind right away.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that I will often do if I'm in a crunch for time is to integrate an Energizer that has some academic component or integration to it. So there's an Energizer called WUSA, which students are using 3 different gestures, or it can be up to as many as you want, but I usually do 3 gestures. And I'll use it to reinforce stages of a life cycle, for example. So if we're studying butterflies, for example, we'll have a gesture for the caterpillar, a gesture for chrysalis, a gesture for butterfly, and we go 3, 2, 1, wusa, and we do an action or a gesture for one of those. And the idea behind this energizer is if they match you, they match the leader, then they sit down. So the object of this is the last person standing, and that last person standing becomes the leader for the next round. But I would definitely recommend Responsive Classroom. I know has a lot of Energizer resources, but because these Energizers usually last between 2 and 5 minutes, they can be a quick game or a chant, but integrating academics into an Energizer can be really helpful and a great way to integrate play.
Thank
I
you
think
so
also-
much, Chris. Oh, yeah, go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Ina.
Um,
Go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I think I heard in the question that the person is a specialist who picks kids up. Maybe they pick students up, and so maybe on the way to your destination, whether it's to go to the work that they're about to do with you or to return to the classroom, there are also things that can be very playful that you do on that journey from one location to the next. You can talk about, how many red circles do you think we're going to see, or how many circles or how many squares, or let's go listen, you hear that song, where's that song coming from, let's go over and see, and let's take a peek in, and can we sing any of those? Let's see if we can sing 8 bars of that song, and maybe they're passing the music room as they are on their way to wherever they're going, and so there's also ways to be playful and skip down the hallway, and I'm not encouraging the running, but a skip down the hallway, trying to see if we can wave at the pre-K class as we go by. There are reading buddies, things that can engage the student in light moments, even just to and fro can be considered ways of incorporating play.
Yeah, along with that, something like a follow the leader down. If you have a group of 2 or 3, each day you could have somebody different be the leader. So it gives them an opportunity, like you would be the first leader, and you guys could talk about it as soon as you got back. And then the next day you could have one of the kids be the leaders and give them a chance to lead their friends, gives them some pride, gives your friends the gross motor of trying to emulate what somebody else is doing physically. So I think a lot of that, and then proactive reminders of like, so we're going to do this down the hall. What do we need to keep in mind when you're the leader? Quiet voice, soft feet, something like that. But I think that, while walking can be a really great way to regulate kids between rooms.
Thank you so much. Alyssa, did you want to add anything in?
You know what? I think that between what the panelists said and what was in the chat, we have so many great ideas. And we do have one more question, and I'm actually going to throw it right back at you, Kate, because we heard a lot about middle school in sports, but there are some questions about like, what does this look like for older kids in a typical classroom setting? And I know that you have some experience in that realm, so I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, I would say actually that Chris probably spoke really eloquently to the experience of middle school students and teachers as well. Any specialist teacher, even in elementary school, you're managing the same constraints and, not seeing your kids all the time, having a very short time period, people moving around. So really, so much of what all these panelists have said already, you can apply to middle school. I think that things like choice time, especially having some sort of voice and choice. I saw somebody mention that in the chat as well. There are ways to give structured choice. So within a concept that you're working on, students can explore. It feels a little like guided discovery, but for maybe more content or topics, and can explore and engage and really ask questions using things like open-ended questions to get them really in the process of inquiry and getting their critical thinking going. They're really playing with the content and playing with the material. So if you can encourage a playful attitude as they jump into exploring whatever new material there is, having them discover the content on their own to be the constructors of their knowledge, that lights up those different parts of play in your brain, I think is another way to think about it, where it's really embedded in the academics. I also think that brain breaks, what we call energizers in middle school, are essential and can be really easily worked in, especially if you teach a few of them early on in the year and really get to know them. It's easy to turn them on and turn them off. That goes back to great responsive classroom practices, such as having expectations and rules and interactive modeling to show them how it's all done. If you set it up well, none of this has to take very much time at all, and it can have a huge impact on the student's level of belonging, significance, fun, engagement, enjoyment, all of which really really influences their success. And again, I would go back through the chat and look at, there's so many different ideas that everybody's had. It's really amazing. So many different types of games people are suggesting for practicing different kinds of content, and playing with the information that you already have.
And I'd also like to add on to what you were saying, Kate, as well. That if we get to know our students, maybe there's, a particular type of music style that they like, that they could be listening to as they enter into the room. Or, if there's a rap that you want to rewrite, whatever the, content is, to find the, Pythagorean theorem, and you just rewrite it, for them in a rap, or have them write the rap, and you just give a verse. Those are also other ways that you can, incorporate something that is engaging for them and that is using their talents and their skills.
Thank you so much for adding that on. That's so important. And I think just a key part of the responsive classroom approach is really getting to know each individual student, and that just opens up the world of possibility. So we're going to start concluding with a reflection. I'm going to share my screen again, and ask you all to take a minute and think about, what is one way that you plan to incorporate play in your classroom or school? I love to think of this as like, when you walk into school tomorrow or next week, what could you immediately apply? If you could make sure you're set to everyone and share some ideas in the chat, that would be incredibly beneficial to everybody. They're already coming in. Hopefully you have a chance to scroll back through and read some of these amazing ideas.
I see a lot of people are talking about brain breaks and energizers. So if you noticed, Kristen in the background sent some links about those and some resources for that. And she just mentioned that you will get the chat as well as well as the recording of the webinar, so you won't lose those things. So yeah, very excited to learn from all of you tonight, in addition to our amazing panelists, and they're all coming in. So take a minute to read through those before we kind of close out.
One thing that I've added this year at the very end of our day, every day, that I think kind of sums up where we are now and closes us out, is we've started doing, within our closing circle, we just have everyone share what their favorite part of the day was. And it helps them remember something that made them happy. And I think it's been a very positive way for our classroom to end every day and to kind of take a breath and be together. And it only takes about 5 minutes. So that's another kind of if time is something that is feels difficult, that I think is a really easy way to remember something that was happy, joyous, and playful within your day in your classroom.
Thank you for sharing that. And as a parent, thank you for helping my child hopefully get there, so that when I ask, she has something to share, right? So fellow parents in here can appreciate that. Here are some resources. Some of these are the ones that Kristen has already put in the chat, but these are some great ways to really promote play in your classroom. There's brain breaks on that first one, which is geared towards middle school students. Those center two are energizers geared towards elementary school students. And then that last one is one of our quick coaching guides, which if you haven't explored those yet, they're really brief, digestible ready to use strategies. They're really great, highly recommend. They're also very affordable. And these will tell you some ways to engage students through their learning to make it playful while still keeping that rigor that we spoke about. I also wanted to mention that we have some one-day workshops going on right now. We are doing some preparation for our 3-day course. It's a newly revamped 3-day course this summer as well. So all of that information can be found at our website, which is on the next slide, in addition to a bunch of our email addresses. So if you want to get in touch with us, if you want to bring us to your school, or if you're having some questions about the implementation of the responsive classroom approach, here are a few different options for email addresses to contact us. Myself and Kate are also just our names with a period between at responsiveclassroom.org. So feel free to reach out to us as well. And while we're on this thank you slide, I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists as well. We really appreciate your time and your knowledge and your expertise. So thank you so much. And Kate has one more quick thing to share.
And lastly, we have one more webinar in our series this year. It will be on March 20th, which is also a Thursday at the same time, and it's about the importance of investing in ongoing professional development. So join us for that. I believe if you signed up for this, you will get automatic information about that, but tell everybody you know. It's a great one for leaders in schools, people who are adjacent to professional development and making those decisions. So come back and join us in March. And in the meantime, have a wonderful evening if you are where it is evening, afternoon, if you're somewhere farther west. Maybe you are somewhere in between, but we hope that you have enjoyed hearing from these amazing panelists and that you leave with a revived sense of the necessity of play in your students' lives. Thanks so much.